Hello, and welcome to Integrative Process Psychotherapy, a human way of understanding what we do as therapists. In this video, we will explore process, one of the central ideas in complexity theory. Understanding how processes unfold and disconnect, and how they sometimes become stuck, is fundamental to effective psychotherapy. This video itself is a process. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. As it unfolds, it gradually changes your experience as you watch it. As you listen, the ideas and images interact with what you already know. Your understanding shifts and reorganizes into new patterns. That is the process of learning. Psychotherapy works in a similar way. All therapeutic inputs and interventions influence the experiential process of the client. Our aim is to help experience move in healthier directions towards greater flow, connectivity, coherence, and creativity. So what is process? At every level of existence, the universe is in a constant state of change. Everything is in dynamic flux. The world is always becoming. Process is the unfolding of events and experiences throughout time. Everything is process, and everything is in process. Moment to moment, we are never exactly the same person twice. We can have similar experiences, but we can never have the identical experience again. Some processes unfold so slowly that they appear stable. Others happen so quickly they barely seem to exist. Human life occupies a kind of middle ground between the slow evolution of galaxies and the fleeting existence of subatomic particles. Despite their differences in scale, all processes tend to follow a common pattern. They arise, they stabilize for a time, and then they transform or dissolve. This rhythm appears everywhere. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus captured this idea perfectly when he said, "You can never step into the same river twice." The Taoist philosopher Chuang-Tzu wrote, "Life has its origin from which it emerges, and death has its place to which it returns. Beginning and end follow each other inexorably." One of the oldest books in the world, the I Ching, the Book of Changes, is entirely based on this principle of constant change and transformation. We see the same pattern in life, birth, living for a period of time, and dying. We see it in the diurnal cycle of day and night and day and night, in which we sleep and we wake and we sleep again. All conversations have a beginning with a greeting, an end with a goodbye. In psychotherapy, we pay close attention to how experience unfolds in time, both in the session and in the client's life. When we look at our own experience, the process of change and movement in our being can be understood to have several qualities. It has flow, how it moves. It has direction. It has stability. And it has different dimensions. So I'm going to go over each one of these in a little detail. So flow refers to how experience changes moment to moment. Just as a river flows along and it can be calm, it can be turbulent, our inner experience also has qualities of flow. So emotions can come and go. They may be tranquil, they may be overwhelming, but they'll always have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Thoughts may be clear, they may be confused, they come and they go one after the other. A therapy session may flow easily, or feel like a struggle, as though time is getting slower and slower. The famous psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described a special form of optimal experience which he called the flow state. This is where a person becomes fully absorbed in the activity, in the moment, leading to both an experience of enjoyment and peak performance. Processes also have direction. Rivers flow downhill. The universe expands outwards. So human development also appears to move in a certain direction. Carl Rogers described this as an actualizing tendency in human beings, a movement towards growth, complexity, and integration. In a very similar way, Carl Gustav Jung spoke about individuation. This is the lifelong process of integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. In myth and story, this movement appears as the hero's journey and is the foundation skeleton of most of the stories and dramas that come out of Hollywood. This is the quest towards wholeness, achievement, and love. A further quality of process is stability. Some patterns endure for long periods, others are fleeting. Galaxies are relatively stable over vast amounts of time. And we could compare that to the wind or the weather, which keeps changing very quickly. In therapy, stability is created through boundaries and regularity, the consistent time, place, and relationship that contains the flow of therapeutic work. And this stability allows deeper processes to safely unfold. No process occurs alone. All processes are interrelated across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Think of the body. It has many interacting levels. At the basis, it has some atomic particles, then it has atoms, chemicals, cells, organs, organ systems, and then the whole of our body. Human experience also operates across multiple dimensions. There's our conscious experience, what we're aware of moment to moment. Then there's semi-conscious experiences and processes, which are kind of at the back of our mind. And then there's unconscious processes, those which we are unaware of. Understanding how these layers of process interact is crucial in psychotherapy, and we will explore these dimensions in the next video. The great American psychologist William James described consciousness as a stream, a continuous flow of thoughts and experience. You could say all experiences flow. We are, in essence, what we experience, whether we are aware of it or not. Even a forgotten dream is still an experience. Light hitting the retina is an experience. Anything that makes a difference in the system, in our living greater system, becomes part of our experience. Experience has multiple dimensions. A helpful metaphor is music. Music is pure process. Each note connects to other notes simultaneously and sequentially, forming patterns and meanings and crescendos and harmonies and dissonances. They all arise as different musical lines and levels interact. In psychotherapy, we cannot separate process from experience. In a session, experience is always changing, moving, shifting. My own experience as a therapist, my client's experience of what we're saying, how the relationship works, what is going on. First and foremost, the therapist must pay attention to how processes unfold during a session in terms of the quality and dimension of a client's experience. The goal of therapy is to influence the client's experiential process so that it becomes more creative, more coherent, more integrated, more connected, and more alive. Ideally, each session ends with the client feeling better, clearer, more integrated, and expansive than when it began. Often, that's accompanied by a sense of calm and completeness. The process of therapy is extraordinarily complex. Many interwoven processes are occurring simultaneously. Most of them are outside of conscious awareness. In a sense, therapist and clients create music together. But the music the client initially brings may be full of disharmony, dissonances, mistakes, and broken transitions. The therapist listens carefully and joins in with that process, gradually helping the music become more harmonious. And this requires trust, respect, and a deep empathy and listening. All psychological problems can be understood as forms of stuckness and disconnection. Clients come to therapy because they feel trapped in repetitive loops of feelings, thoughts, relationships, and behaviors. The Irish writer Flann O'Brien wrote, "Hell goes round and round. In shape, it is circular, and by nature, it is repetitive and nearly unbearable." This captures the essence of the suffering caused by a stuck, repetitive process. When experiences become repetitive and stagnant, it's almost as though something in our being cannot tolerate it. There's a Taoist saying that expresses a similar idea. Movement is natural, stagnation is sickness. This stuckness we can see in therapy in many, many different forms. There's obsessive thinking, where a person can't get beyond certain ideas. Maybe there's compulsive checking, there's chronic anxiety or depression. Addictions are a particular form of stuckness. Panic attacks, which I discussed in a previous video, are forms of stuckness where a person cannot get out of their fear and it escalates. All phobias are forms of stuckness because the experience cannot move on. And a prolonged and complicated grieving is also stuck. Processes can be stuck in many different ways. Process can be stuck on, just like a faucet that's been turned on and it keeps flowing, flowing, and flowing. And it often escalates uncontrollably, as in a panic attack. Sometimes an internal experiential process is stuck off, as in depression, where engagement with life and relationship collapses. Sometimes it loops endlessly, as in addiction or obsession. Often, the underlying issue is a disconnection between the conscious ego and the deeper unconscious processes. And this creates a feeling of depletion. Life has been sucked dry of inner meaning. Of course, therapists themselves experience stuckness. If we're in a session and it seems very similar to the previous session, if the same issues keep getting repeated every time the client comes, if there's a sense of lack of progress, if the conversation seems to always be superficial and on the surface, if the therapist feels frustrated or bored, or the discussion wanders around without a sense of direction and no sense of creativity or newness, then we know that therapy has become stuck, and the therapist is probably stuck in their own experience. When therapy flows again, the opposite occurs. Energy returns, patterns become clearer, the therapist feels more engaged and creative, and processes become visible, available for our interventions, for our attention. In order to work with process, we have to develop certain skills. It's a particular kind of awareness. The therapist is a kind of detective of experience. And we have to palpate or feel process. In a previous video, I've talked about that as apperception. This is the ability to feel the movement of experience through a kind of intuitive attention, a deep empathy, and a bodily awareness. Our task as therapists is to locate where the process is stuck, where it's disconnected, and introduce a meaningful difference. So all interventions are in some sense introducing differences that make a difference. But the intervention must resonate with the client's experiential process. Otherwise, it can create more confusion. And of course, there's another very important challenge. If we are stuck ourselves, certain processes become invisible to us. We just can't see them. And when we can't perceive a process that's happening for the client or in the session, then we're unable to influence it in any way. This began, it unfolded with certain ideas and certain images, and now it's ending. But maybe you can notice something. You are not exactly the same person as when you began listening and watching. Something has shifted. Therapy sessions unfold in a very similar way. They begin, they develop, and then they come to a close. So as a therapist, it's very important for you to check in with yourself. How am I at the beginning? And then at the end, check in again. If you're feeling satisfied, if you're feeling energized, well, then you know that the process in the session has moved on. In the next video, I'll explore in detail how our models and techniques of therapy interact with different dimensions of process.